So the original title of this movie was called Something Else, and after having seen it, yeah, that's a pretty accurate description. After Midnight stars Jeremy Gardner as Hank, whose girlfriend Abby, played by Brea Grant, recently leaves town unexpectedly. Soon after, he realizes a murderous, mysterious creature begins stalking him every night. So, he locks himself in his house to prevent the monster from breaking in, and not only has to worry about keeping himself alive, but also sane. Jeremy Gardner also wrote and co-directed this movie. He's directed 2 other movies before this, one called The Battery in 2012, and another called Tex Montana Will Survive in 2015. I honestly don't know much about him or either of those 2 movies. In fact, this really wasn't on my radar until recently. I heard it played in some festivals last year and did well. It wasn't up until about the beginning of this year when one of the co-stars, Henry Zebrowski, promoted it on his true crime podcast, The Last Podcast on the Left. And I'm a fan of his work from there, so that made me want to check this out. Especially since horror is one of my favorite genres, and I always love when we get these weird, experimental sort of movies. This crosses romantic drama with a monster movie, so I knew going into this would be a pretty unique experience, because that's something we never get to see. The only recent example that comes off the top of my head is maybe Let the Right One In. And yeah, after seeing this is definitely unique. So let's talk about it. Of the 2 genres, the romance aspect was by far my favorite. This is at the forefront of the entire narrative, and it's the part I found myself most invested in. The movie cuts back and forth between 2 different time periods, before and after Abby left, and I like this narrative technique. As far as after her leaving, it starts you off in the middle of things, and it never stops to explain to you exactly what happened. There's never one defining moment as to why she left. You have to piece together through the dialogue what exactly happened, and I thought that was great. It'll cut to a flashback and it'll see through maybe what seems like an offhand exchange, or the look on someone's face reacting to what they hear, what the implied reasons may be. I felt it made the conversations flow very smoothly. This is where the acting comes into play. Big time. Both leads are great and have very believable chemistry, though I would say Brea Grant is by far the standout as Abby. She's very charming whenever Hank and Abby have a nice moment together, and when there's a conflict, she keeps things bottled up, but she's trying to hold back her frustration and approach something with a level head. So the way she holds it in, it adds this nice layer of tension that's subtle, but effective. Jeremy Gardner is also really solid as Hank. The movie delves into his psyche after Abby left, and I thought that was really well done. There are a lot of scenes of him alone trying to deal with Abby leaving, but also deal with this monster trying to break into his house. There are moments where he just fended off the monster from breaking in, and afterwards he's clearly thinking about Abby, and you can see how it takes its toll on him. He's juggling multiple emotions at once, and the way it wears him out was portrayed well. There's some comedic relief from Henry Zebrowski as Hank's best friend, though for anyone who's familiar with his work from Last Podcast on the Left or the Adult Swim show Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell, this is a much more straightforward role for him. Kind of ironic though, because he's known for 2 things that have a very off-kilter sense of humor, and this has a very odd premise, but this is a very straightforward role for him. But some of his jokes worked, some of them felt clearly improvised, which added to the natural dialogue in this film and alleviated some of the tension, so it made his presence feel welcome here. While the romance part of this movie worked, the monster part didn't so much. Like, parts of it were fine. There are plenty of moments where you suspect the creature is lurking around, but you can't see it, and it makes the scenes very suspenseful. But there's a much different tone to this part of the film that doesn't blend as well with the romance aspect. The tonal shifts are extremely jarring. There are plenty of moments where it's this heartfelt scene, and it's very sweet, and then all of a sudden this monster just comes out of nowhere and throws you off completely. Which, I mean, I guess it's kind of the point. Romance and horror don't go hand in hand normally. Though I think this would have worked better had the monster aspect not been treated as an afterthought. It spends so much time on the romance aspect that it only sporadically cuts back to the monster stuff, and it feels more of like a reminder that it's still there. The monster stuff was cool, but it's almost easy to forget about it at times for how little it's focused on. I'll put it this way. I like the 2014 Godzilla reboot, and I know plenty of other people who also like that movie. However, I know just as many people who don't like that movie because of the lack of Godzilla and the increased attention on the humans. And that's kind of the case here. So if you saw that movie, depending on how you felt about that, you're probably gonna feel the same way about this. And don't get me wrong, I think horror works best when it comes to the things that are implied or you can't see. Because if we don't know what's there, that's frightening. So in that regard, it works to some degree. But the stories just focus so little on the monster at times that when it brings it back in, it throws the pacing off completely. The movie will repeatedly put plot points on hold to focus on something else, and it makes it feel like a slow burn to get to the end. In a way, it's less than the sum of its parts. No individual story element is bad, it's just they don't come together to form one cohesive unit. This is definitely not for everyone. I could see people being thrown off by the weird mixing of two different genres that normally don't go together. I think it could have benefited from focusing on the horror elements a little more. For me though, the good ultimately outweighed the bad. I thought the acting was great, and the storytelling, as far as the romance aspect goes, was pretty on point. Despite its problems, I like this. After Midnight gets a 6.5 out of 10. If you like movies that are out of the ordinary, I'd say give this a shot. It's far from perfect, but when it works well. It didn't get a big release, it's actually out on VOD now, so if you're looking for something different and want to stay in and watch a movie, give this a shot. But let me know, did you see After Midnight, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like the mixing of romance and horror, or did you think it didn't work so well? And what's your favorite monster movie to date? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you like what you see, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.